Well, I know today a lot of people identify plants through apps like iNaturalist and stuff like that. So, they're a great change in plant, not only just plants, but everything. You can identify lots of things with iNaturalist and a lot of other different kinds of so-called apps or artificial intelligence things out there today. They're wonderful. It's a big change, and what I tell people really, it's just like it was a few years ago when we actually would open up a wildflower book and just thumb through it till you could identify the plant, but it's doing it for you, doing it fast. But just remember that I made mistakes with the wildflower book, and iNaturalist makes mistakes. I hate to go there because I see so many mistakes that they make on plants. There are some other apps out there that are just specializing in plants, or if you get into other things, there are specialists on butterflies, things like that. But iNaturalist covers everything. University of California that's a wonderful thing to sign up for. Lots of different activities going on. But I warn people that if you really can just learn the few basic things about plant parts and so forth, you can do a lot of your own identification, and you can check what's going on with the artificial intelligence. So with this plant here, we'll talk about it later. It's a very famous plant called the pawpaw, the largest native fruit, native to the United States. Most of our other fruits, oranges and apples, well, I should say even apples, I think, came from Europe. There might have been some native apples, but for sure not in Louisiana. There's no native apples here. But anyway,
right.
This one. Pardon?
So this is a pawpaw.
This is a pawpaw, yeah.
Pawpaw, okay.
Yeah. We were eating lots of these fruits. I've got two big trees here. We're eating lots of fruits in July. Wonderful taste, and there should be some growing. Could be some growing. Where do y'all live?
Ethel, close to St. Francis.
I grew up in Greensburg, so I know that whole part of part of the state over there. Ethel is East Louisiana, yeah.
Does it have a little reddish ball?
No, it's a great big one, not this big, yeah. And so it would have to be in the well-drained. I don't know if you live along the creek with the well-drained. There's some.
No, I don't have a creek.
There's some on Thompson's Creek, and there's some back on the Avett River, back that way. So.
Are the leaves edible as well?
No, the leaves smelled very strong, and there have been some medicinal aspects of this going on, and also the zebra swallowtail butterfly. So some people grow this not to eat, but to let the butterflies eat. Because the only plant it can live on is the pawpaw. Now there's another species that we'll see when we walk around. It's called a dwarf pawpaw. You may have this on your property too, because if it's dry sand soil, you may have a dwarf pawpaw already growing there. They're smaller, and they once you learn we'll get to the odor in a moment. You'll see there's a very distinct odor here. So lots of that. But when you look at a leaf like this, think of the point on the stem where this leaf is produced is called a node, N-O-D-E, node. So there's a node there. You can look all this up, and I'm sure there are YouTubes, and she's going to be posting this on one of our Facebooks or somewhere of that. But anyway, that's a node. So we'll come back to that. It becomes very important in just a few minutes. But the leaf itself is usually made of two major parts with a third one, and the two parts are the green part here. This is called the blade. And this little stalk back here that connects the blade back is called the petiole. You could call it the stalk with the petiole. Now, sometimes it's real short, and sometimes it's much longer. A good way to remember this is that there are two plants out there where we eat just the petiole. Celery, that's a petiole that you're eating. Now, I don't know if you've ever been up north and eaten rhubarb pie, but rhubarb is the second one. That's where you're eating just the petiole. So rhubarb and celery. Now, in lettuce and many other things, we eat both the blade and the petiole. We don't distinguish between the two. But in the case of rhubarb and celery, we focus on just the petiole. Now, if a plant does not have a petiole completely, this one's pretty short, but if it doesn't have a petiole at all, then that's said to be sessile. So no petiole is sessile. So if you read about a description of a plant with sessile leaves, and we'll talk more about those in a few minutes, we'll see one over there, a medicinal one over on that front table that's called boneset. that has no petiole. So a number of plants do not have. That makes it easy to identify. So these are the things that I look for identification, are things like that, whether sessile or not. Now, so blade and petiole, those are important characteristics. There is a third part, and those are called stipules. This is always hard to show because I can't find plants that really have them. It's kind of optional. Some have, some don't. The stipules are in pairs, so there are always two of them, and they're on the stem at the base of the leaf. Now, if you're familiar and have ever grown garden peas or English peas, those great big green ear-like things, those are stipules. Or you can find them in other plants, and sometimes they fall off right away. If you're familiar with black locusts, it has two spiny things, and those are stipules, or used to be stipules. So they're modified into the spiny. So paired structures on here. Well, we may see some when we walk around, but it's hard for me to bring one in to show you a really good one. So, but usually think just of blade and petiole, and keep in mind there could be that third optional thing called stipules out there. So that's the basic parts. Now, the first thing I want to know is the so-called arrangement of the leaf. The arrangement is how many leaves per node. This one right here is alternate. See how it alternates from this side to this side, and I pull this one off, so there's one here. But alternate is, notice there's only one leaf per node. Now, got to find a plant, and we will look at it, the other possibility here. Let's see where I put them this morning.
See the ball number? It looks so real.
Well, here I only have two of these, but I'll find the third one. Notice on this one, instead of one leaf per node, there are two. And I guess I'm walking away from the camera. I'm not a good person for the TV, huh?
Like a Christmas tree. Two nodes. Never thought of it that way.
Well, what I'll do is come back and cut one of these in half. I'm going to steal some from you just for a second. Mm-hmm. All right. So notice here, two leaves at every node. This is called opposite. So if you walk up to a plant and it has opposite leaves, you should be real happy. Because in your mind, you're going to have to only go through a small number of plants. Whereas if it were like the first one, this one, you got a lot. So this, a guy from New Orleans once that told me that the way to think about it is that this is an 80%, this is 20% of the plants, or something in that vicinity. So unhappy, happy when you're trying to identify, because here,
it narrows it down.
It really comes down to that. So in my books, a medical doctor that was helping me, pushing me to do plant books and so forth, he said, you really need to make charts, and I do. So in my purple book, I call it the one on the woody plants of Louisiana, I have charts where you could look at a list of the ones that are opposite, the ones that, that are, and I listed the smaller ones, so the ones that are opposite. So this is opposite. So some other plants that do have this are dogwoods. So that's the way you can tell dogwood. Dogwoods have opposite leaves. Maples have opposite leaves, so that's one other characteristic there. And then the genus Viburnum, which is a number of, there are no really good common names for Viburnum, but opposite leaves make it easy for identification because you're only dealing with a few. Now, if the one thing that I forgot to point out is that at every node, there's always these little lateral buds here. And those grow into branches. And so if there are some buds, so the buds, there's a bud associated with every leaf. Now, if the leaves are opposite, the branches are going to be opposite. So you can really see that with this one. Look at that plant. This has opposite leaves, and look at the branches. See how the branches are? Because the buds grow into it. I have had to identify trees before for wetland delineations. I stand underneath a great big tree. I can't see the leaves, but I can see the branches. So I can tell the difference between an ash tree and a hickory tree. Very important sometimes. One's wet, one's dry. But you can look up and see if the branches are opposite, that goes back, that the leaves had to be opposite. So that helps you for identification. So opposite and alternate are the two characteristics that I want. So I used to get phone calls from people, and still do, but say, I'd like for you to identify a tree, and then I'm sitting there almost many times, the next word's going to be, it has green leaves. And that really narrows down my choice. But I was hoping they would say it has alternate leaves or it has opposite leaves. But anyway, that's the one of the three that we're going to go over this morning. Then we'll start looking at plants. And so you want to, from now on, when you walk up to a plant and you try to identify it, you want to know that arrangement. Alternate, opposite. Now there is a third. Very few plants have that, and that is to have more than 2 leaves per node. And that's called whorled, W-H-O-R-L-E-D. And so that really narrows down. One plant that has that is the catalpa tree. If you have a catalpa worm or catalpa tree, that's got more than 2 leaves per node. Another one is that plant that in the spring we call sticky willy, that you pull up out of the ground and it sticks to your clothes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That one has more than 2. And jopai weed, which is a famous medical plant out there there's some here I can show you, there's one here in the yard planted. But anyway, whorl leaves is really far out, so to speak. You only have a very, very few plants to go through with whorl leaves. But most of the time, we just think opposite and alternate for arrangement. So that's the first one. Okay. Now, the second characteristic is the major veins. And I have the plant right here for this. And this one. And all you need this time is the leaf itself. And take one leaf off.
It does look like a sweet corn.
It is.
I hate a sweet corn.
A lot of people do.
I didn't get any balls this year. Did you? The green balls? Did they hit the ground?
I don't even think we have any trees around,
Get some
do
of
we?
the pastures and stuff. If you walk out in the yard barefooted, you'll find one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Some people that like birds will say the birds do eat the seeds out of that, but a lot of people, it is probably the most common and widespread non-pine tree in the state is sweet gum. Pops up everywhere. But look at the difference between these 2 leaves right here. Now, the difference is in the arrangement of the major veins. So just pull one of the leaves off that first one I gave you and pull one leaf off of this one and look at them side by side. Okay, so the second characteristic that we're looking at is the major veins in the blade. Notice here there's 1, and here there's more than 1. Okay. This one is said to be pinnate, the term, but you could just say one major vein, or you look one major vein, or you could say pinnate. This one major vein is usually called the midrib. Okay. Now this one is called palmate because it's like the bones in the palm of your hand. Mm-hmm. So there's more than 1, usually an odd number. 3 and 5 are very popular numbers in the palmate. So palmate and pinnate. That's the second major characteristic. These are usually wide leaves, so sycamore, maples, this one the sweet gum, and the original clothing store has palmate major veins. Say what?
Levi's?
No.
No, it's Wranglers.
Even further back than that. We're talking about the fig tree.
Oh, hey! We're going way
The fig tree, that's palmate major veins too. So the The wide ones usually in there 3. So, that's important for that one. So that's a big, the easy one to see if you have the leaf in front of you. You can see, is it pinnate or is it palmate? And that separates. This is the 20, this is the 80. Okay, so the separation for there. A few years ago, I was asked to go give a talk in February, and I wanted to bring these plants, but I could not find an evergreen. There are no evergreen plants with palmate major veins. I guess because the leaves are so big, it's hard for them to maintain, and so I could not find a one to take with me. Now, in the summer, they're here, but there are no evergreen palmate major vein plants in our area. Now, palmetto is, but that's kind of stretching it. But I'm talking about your usual. I couldn't find a sweet gum. I couldn't find a sycamore. I couldn't find a maple. All of those lose their leaves. So that's another characteristic, and that's another one that's kind of hard to see. In the summer, but in the winter it's pretty easy for that. Yeah. So, in fact, I usually watch movies with a critical thing. If there are no leaves on the trees and they're talking about summer or the other way around, I can't watch a movie without being critical of what the background. And I've heard people that know birds that way. They'll say they have birds chirping at night that don't chirp at night on some movies. So we have to be careful with our critique. So anyway, that's a characteristic that's very, very important right here is this one. And that's one that often you can't see in a picture unless you intend, spread it out. But often you just can't. You can see all the green, but you can't see the details of that. Now, what I do for the morning emails, and I spend a lot of time on this table right over here, and I cut up the leaves and I put them out and spread them out and take pictures. So I usually have 4 or 5 pictures showing the characteristics of what they are, so that you can see whether it's palmate, whether it's pinnate, that sort of thing. So these two, you want to know, is it opposite or alternate? You want to know if it's pinnate major veins or palmate major veins. So now, the third one is the most difficult to see, the most difficult to follow. Now, what I've been showing you so far, these leaves, the blade here is not cut up into smaller segments. So this is called a simple leaf. But if I were to give you this plant right here, this is one leaf. And I got plenty of this to go around, so everybody. So this is a leaf. So what's happened here is this is a compound leaf, and this is a simple leaf. And so what's happened is that blade has been cut up into smaller segments, and each one of these smaller segments is called a leaflet. So I hate to disappoint you, but you've probably been saying leaves of 3, leave it be. Mm-hmm. It should have been leaflets of 3, because that's a compound leaf, because most poison ivy has a heck of a lot more than 3 leaves, but it only has 3 leaflets. So in fact, you could almost take the end of this plant right here and make that into poison ivy. See, right there.
Right.
3 leaflets. So we're going to change the world. It's going to say leaflets of 3, leave it be, rather than leaves of 3. So this is the most difficult of the 3 characteristics for you to kind of see. Because you look at that, you say, look, those are leaves that are opposite. You see, you think, oh, they're opposite there, that sort of thing. But so there are 2 ways that I find for recognizing is something a compound leaf. And one is, see how that flattens in the same plane? If you put it down on the table, look how and you can almost imagine at one time this was one great big blade, and it got cut up into smaller segments, okay? So that's a compound leaf. And so that's the most difficult one to see. Now, the other way you can look at it is that, and you can't always see it, but there should be a lateral bud right here, but you can't always see that. So some people say look for the lateral bud, because leaflets don't have a lateral bud, but leaves do. But I like the idea of them flattened in the same plane, just to start to look at them. Okay, so but in nature there are 2 major kinds of compound leaves. The one that we have here is called pinnate This is pinnate, and I'm going to get the other kind right over here.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know it.
Now this one is a red buckeye, and it's not an edible, but let's see if I put enough here. But I think, but one of the earliest leaves. So what you want to do is take a leaf off. See, like this. This is one leaf. That one's kind of, this is one of the earliest ones too. So this is a palmate compound. This is a pinnate compound. Pinnate and palmate. So this one used to be this. See?
Oh, wow.
So they go from simple to compound when the blade is cut up into leaflets. So palmate compound, the famous shirt in Colorado with 7 leaflets is a palmate compound. Blackberries are palmate compound. Virginia creeper, so there are some.
Right.
Those are palmate compounds. So when you're out there looking, that's palmate now. So palmate compound came from a leaf that had palmate major veins. Now, so this is pinnate, and in palmate, it's just palmate. There's no further steps. But we have to go back here, see if I can find one. I have to go back here, and you could have a terminal leaflet, in which case there would be an odd number. So there's odd, and then there are even. So in this one, so there are odd and evens. Hickory, which I have a pecan and hickory right here in a moment I'll bring back. This is sumac, by the way, not poison, but other sumac. It's odd pinnate. And then the even pinnate would be black walnut. That's the way you tell a black walnut from a pecan or hickory. It doesn't have that terminal leaflet, so even. Also, the mimosa tree is even if you don't find it. So in pinnate compound, you have to worry about whether it's one pinnate like this, or I get another one here in just a second, or it the other way. But in this one, it's just plain palmate. There is no further steps with that. But let me see if I brought that. I know I brought that plant in, but it's a sticky one, and I tried to put it out of the way this morning. Before I do that, though, here's the pecan tree. See, so all your life you thought that was several leaves, but that's one leaf right there.
Wow.
And so that one's pinnate. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So that one's pinnate, and then so there are a number of those that are like that. Ash trees, pecan trees, other compound sumac trees. But then Mother Nature was not happy. This one's a spiny one. But here's a single leaf with many leaflets. This is a devil's walking stick. So this one is 2 compound. Instead of being just one, it's divided twice. So you can have, in pinnate, you can have even or odd, and you can have 1 or 2 or even 3 pinnate. But in palmate, it's just simply a dead end. It's palmate. So when you think about it, these are the oddball ones. But again, you can almost see how that flattens in the same plane. All those leaflets out there. So those are the things that I look for identification in the plants. Those 3 characteristics, whether it's a alternate or opposite, whether it's pinnate major veins or palmate major veins, and then whether it's simple or compound. Those are the 3 things that you really can go a long way toward doing your own identification or verifying what you've gotten identified through one of the artificial apps, things like that. So that, or even impress your friends with, it can't be. That's what I have to tell people a lot of times. It can't be this because that one has opposite, or that sort of things. That it has. it can't be this, it can't be that. So that's the basic parts. Now, if we go back, if everybody could get a leaf of the pawpaw. Now, so the pawpaw, had so many characteristics. This one, right here. It has so many characteristics that make it an 80%. It's simple, it's alternate, and it has pinnate major veins. So what do you do? Well, one thing I do is I crush that leaf and smell. There's nothing else that smells like a pawpaw. I've had it described as being like what?
Like smoke.
Smoke. Okay. I've heard green beans, bell pepper, oil well, road tar. It's strong, and that's the reason the zebra swallowtail. Yeah, the road. That's the reason the zebra swallowtail caterpillars eat this. They get protection. Then most of the caterpillars, butterflies, eat plants that have strong odor, so birds don't eat them. Don't eat the caterpillars, so they're protected. So the zebra swallowtail eats this. It's also been reported to have some possible anti-cancer uses from this leaf, things like that. So there's some research going on with that. So, that's one thing that you could look at. So you're saying, okay, if you have those leaves with the 80% everything, arrangement, major veins, and type. In this case, simple. You have to go to other things, and odor is one that I use a lot for that. So that one, and just general.
You can't eat this?
No. Well, you could, but I don't. Everything's edible once.
So it means you ain't had.
That's a good way to put it.
That comes from a fungus, a mushroom.
There's studies
Yeah.
lately coming out on the leaf and the cancer.
Smells good.
The second leaf that I gave you, well, actually maybe the third one, this one, I think y'all knew already, sweet gum.
Yeah.
Pretty distinct one, but because it's got palmate major veins, things that we don't go into. See how you can also do the margins or lobed. There's a lot of other, there's a lot more. There's also an odor to sweet gum. Yeah, there is an odor there, a pleasant
They call
odor.
it sweet.
Yeah, very good. It's like mint.
Now I have it over here. My ancestors would go out and wound a big sweet gum tree, and a few days later they'd come back and chew the gum off from it. So this was the chewing gum, but today with juicy fruit, big red, all that, nobody's going to eat the gum off of a sweet gum tree. But people used to eat Quite a few butterflies and moths also eat the leaves of this. So if you're trying to grow for butterflies and moths, the caterpillars, and this is one of the plants. Now there are two plants in Louisiana that have winged stems, and this is one. See the wings on the stem. So they not always have the wings. They don't always have the wings. They don't always. Now the other one is winged out. Which has on the stem. That the only two plants that I know of that if you look back on the twigs and their wings are back, then it's going to either be a sweet gum or a winged down. So there are other little characteristics other than the basics, but that you could go to for that. Okay. This plant here that I just showed you briefly is the example of one with the opposite. This is a viburnum. This one's also called arrowwood because it made nice straight branches, and supposedly Native Americans would make the arrow shafts out of this. And it's a genus that has edible fruits. These little, and they're not this species, but I don't have it here. There's one called wild raisin. Now these are not. You probably do. This is one of those.
We have that on the fence line.
Probably so.
What is the name?
What's that one?
This one's called arrowwood.
Arrowwood.
Yeah. Well, I'll put it over there in a minute once we get through,
And
and
you
then you
can
can
eat
take
that.
pictures of
I
it.
guess you can. You're
He's gonna lift the whole class.
Well,
up.
but-
At least once.
He'll be there when the class is over.
There's not much flavor, but if you want to try one, there is one called Wild Raisin, which is bigger, which is a
Here is
famous
it.
one. Yeah, this one, you know, you can survive on this,
So,
but it's not the
Is
best.
this good for anything?
It might be. That's a medicinal thing. I really have not. That's something I look up every morning before I send it out. What's the medicinal use of every plant? Seems like had some medicinal use. Our ancestors and the Native Americans. So it's not the best one in the world. Yeah, it's kind of bitter, huh?
Dry your mouth out.
But anyway, but there's some better tasting ones in that group.
But if it's good for you, I'd eat it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing about it. You don't know. That's what we're going to do. Is we're going to make teas this afternoon. That you wonder, but when you're drinking that, if you're not getting the good antibiotic things from the
Yeah.
tea itself, and from just eating these things, if we're not getting things, because I've seen some reports that people that eat totally processed food end up being very unhealthy. It seems like there was a guy one time did a YouTube eating just something at McDonald's for a month. He got really, really sick.
Yeah.
So anyway, there are things from the out and chewing on and eating things from the wild like this and making teas from it seems to get you some of the missing things you might be missing from. And I don't do the herbal, but there is an herbal. Y'all are not too far from Baton Rouge. There is an herbal. The lady is doing one on the 13th at Hilltop on herbal. See the book over there. That's
Oh,
what
really?
Corrine Martin from Hunville is doing at Hilltop Arboretum on. I think that's what y'all gonna. If you get when I get y'all on the email, and then you start getting it, you'll get upcoming events.
good,
Like on
yeah.
Monday. On Mondays, I usually say this is what's coming up this week. So 13th, what is that? Tuesday night, or whatever the 13th next week is. She's going to be at Hilltop Arboretum doing she came here. She's got a nice little book on herbal plants. I'm pointing to that book on the table over there. Did that back a couple of years ago. So anyway, but notice how you're thinking opposite leaves on this, and opposite branches, and then the fruits on it. So we'll put this one down in a moment with a number. It's on the list there, and then you can photograph it. So it seems like, let me see.
What about that? When you see you've got 4.
Yeah, this is where they're starting to grow and they're making their own leaves over here. See, that's a branch with opposites. See,
Oh, I got
yeah,
you. Okay.
yeah. Good point. Yeah.
You see what they chew out of that stem.
Here's another plant that's very famous. Let me see if I have some more. You start looking at it and you're kind of disappointed because it's going to have a new meaning for disappointment, alternate and simple. Tonight major vein. But look at this plant. This is a very famous plant called black cherry. Makes fruits that are edible, and they make a black cherry drink. Okay, but you look at the leaves and you see, well, that it's it's alternate, it's simple, it's got pinnate major veins, so it's going to be a lot. So what do I use for identification? This one has a number of things. One, if you take it off and look very carefully at the upper side of the petiole, there should be 2 little glands right there, 2 little bumps right at the top. Right there.
Okay.
There are 2 little bumps right there on either side of the petiole. See it right there and right here.
Yeah, I see it. You see it right there? It's like this little dot.
Yeah.
And for some of them, you turn it over and the midrib has some yellow hairs along it. This one doesn't have as much as others, but turn the leaf
Oh
over.
yeah, I see that.
See the yellow hairs along the midrib.
The yellow right there.
So black cherry has a number of those, but then even take that twig and smell of it. It has a very strong odor that break the twig, and that one's distinct. So black cherry. Getting to know black cherry
It's almost like
is pretty easy when you know what to look for. You see, you're looking at the fact. You start out with the fact that it's got the alternate simple pinnate major veins, but then it's got these other characteristics that help, like the yellow fuzz on the underside of the midrib. You know what? 30 minutes ago, you didn't know what a midrib was, but I hope, well, maybe you did. Don't want to assume, but anyway, now you know it's that main vein down the middle, and then also the petiole, the upper part of the petiole, the little bumps there. That's usually, I think the problem is, I know for me, I have to put my glasses on to see. Okay, but then the odor is what I really can rely on. That there's nothing else that I know of with that crushed twig odor that black cherry has to verify that. Okay. Yeah.
Is this the only part that is edible, or the fruits?
Just the fruits are edible,
Okay.
because there are some problems with cyanide in some of these for cows and stuff, and some of the, but the fruits are edible. But there's a short time period the fruits are on, and then the birds really go after them. In parts of Louisiana, they used to harvest a lot of black cherries and mix it with different alcohol and let it sit for so many months. They called it cherry bounce. So if you find some Cajun type things, they would, some say vodka, some say other kinds of alcohol, but they would mix the black cherries. But today I really have a hard time finding black cherries. The fruits don't stay on very long because the birds really seem to like the black cherry. And not many make the fruits, but they do. When they do make it, they don't last very long. Yeah. But people, it seems like people
Like the
used to have
sweet
more
gum.
black cherries to work with.
Because not all sweet gums make the balls.
Right, some don't, yeah. And I guess that's some people's objection. Now, originally I gave you this plant, but this is the same genus.
Mm-hmm.
These are both sumacs. Neither one's poison. Now, poison is a long way from here, but notice both of these make really great fruits for making tea out of in the fall of the year. They'll have these red fruits on it that you can soak in water and get a lemonade out. Or if you go to a Mediterranean restaurant, they'll serve they grind up the fruits and they call it sumac, and you can put it on this very lemon flavor. But notice the difference between the two right here. This part here is winged. See the wings here? You don't see the wings here? So this is called shining sumac, and this is called winged sumac.
Where are the wings?
So right
It's on
along
the
that's a word I didn't know.
Little,
The
Yeah.
stick.
Okay, remember now this is the petiole.
You got your glasses on.
This used to be the midrib. This is now called the rachis. I didn't want to give you too many words, but that's the rachis. See that little wing
right on
in
the edge.
between the. Let's put it on your white paper there. Right in between
You
the.
see it right there?
See, this one doesn't have it.
It's white.
In between.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Okay,
that's
okay.
that's the winged rachis. So in this one, so that's the difference between these two. This one is more North Louisiana. This one's all over Louisiana. Both the winged.
And what's this one called?
Or shining. You may have this. It's white. It's pretty. There's some, I planted some here. It wasn't here on my property, but I planted it, so I have this one and I have this one. It's some other little things that you can work with. The fruits are really good, and probably in another 2 weeks I would be serving sumac lemonade, but I can't. They're not ripe yet. They would make red fruits that have lots of lemon flavor. You can soak it in water and have lemonade for drinking. When this one makes the fruits, they hang down. We'll see some old ones from last year when we walk back.
Oh.
When this one makes the fruits, they stand up. So there's a difference between the fruits and difference in the leaves, things like that for the two different ones. So there are other characteristics, but they both are sumacs because they both are pinnate compound. Remember, this is pinnate compound, and they're odd pinnate compound with the leaflet at the tip. And then you start looking at the side here. I'm red-green colorblind, but I can see a difference in the green here and the green here. Mm-hmm. This one's more of a white or light green, and this one's more of a green. Right?
Yeah.
They're green shades, and I can see them from a distance. In there, so and this one never has that really pinkish. It may have red here, but it won't have that pinkish like this one does. So that's. We can photograph these. Let's
Now,
see.
does that one stay the pinkish color all year? or
No, it
does
doesn't.
change?
It's some more white at times. Okay. It seems like there was one other plant that I wanted to show you. Oh, this one. Actually, two more. Well, I guess I don't have that second one, but this one is a very famous plant. Right here, very important in edible, medicinal, and so forth. And later we will serve you some waters. This one right here. Notice the new leaf growing. This one has opposite leaves. See here, opposite, and then the branches growing out. So I was talking about the bud grew into a branch, so the branches are opposite. This is elderberry, famous medicinal, famous everything. So this had the fruits up here at the top that fell off, and the white flowers that are on it. And later we have some in the refrigerator. We found a plant down the road with flowers on it. In fact, I think you might see it away on the third table. And then we took some fresh flowers and put it in water yesterday, so it's called elder water. It's got a good flavor to it, for that. But you can recognize the plant because it's pinnate compound. It's one of the quickest to wilt, though. But see, there's a leaf. That's one leaf I always hated because it wilts so quickly. Mm-hmm. But it's also opposite, see? So it had two characteristics for it. And then it makes the fruits up at the top with that, flowers and fruit. So elderberry, and a very important medicinal. You can go to Walmart and buy sambucan, which is the scientific name. People use that. And a lot of, later on in the winter, we give away a lot of plants. People show up, and the elderberry was real popular last year. So, I mean, I just have them all over the property. People say, why do you give them away? I said, well, why not? I mean, people come get them, and then, there are plenty of those, and plenty of other, but quite a number of pawpaws too that sprout. So people come back in the winter and dig up the pawpaws. I got a couple of trees here, but they make a lot of sprouts. I don't know how many we have given away in the last 3 years of pawpaw sprouts. I would put out a sign that said "free pawpaw." And then I would say, "I'm not in jail, but maybe I should be." Anyway, the pawpaws and the elderberries were very popular over the last couple of years, so we'll get a chance for you to photograph. The one I really wanted to, and I'm pretty sure I brought it, this is a terrible invasive here. Anybody recognize it?
A bush.
It's a bush, yeah, okay. This is the famous, y'all probably have a lot of this on your property. This is privet. This is the privet. The Chinese
That's
privet,
what's on
yeah.
the fence.
Yeah, privet. And
Under the trees.
everybody in east of the Mississippi. We have it over here, but not nearly as bad as from the Florida parishes, from East, West Louisiana, St. Lino, Tangipahoa, all those parishes. That
It makes a white flower.
white flower that some people will say that are allergic. And there's a second species, the great big leaves, that are, people do a lot of things. Another ligustrum. This is a ligustrum. So what I wanted to show you, and I thought I brought one in, the yopon. Oh, there it is. People have said, how do you tell yopon from...
I put it in a vase with water.
Yopon, we're going to drink tea of this afternoon. These are the two plants that look a lot alike. And if you live anywhere in the country, you have this.
Yes.
And hopefully you don't have...
Poisonous.
We got plenty of this stuff.
But look at the difference between the two. Well, what's the difference here?
Well, that's got fruit on it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's true, but this one could have fruit on it. Look at the arrangement. This one's alternate and opposite.
Yeah.
So people want to know, and I pull up a lot of this on my property. This is the Chinese privet, so the opposite leaves here, but they're both kind of evergreen. But this is the one in my left hand here, yopon, is the only plant native to the United States with caffeine.
With
So
caffeine?
Caffeine, yeah. So they sell now black tea.
They sure do everywhere.
Yeah, and so that took over in recent years. It's become very popular. It was kind of misleading for a number of years. The scientific name is Alex vomitoria. So there were Boy Scout. I'll even remember a Boy Scout from Clinton, guy from Clinton, telling me, he would tell his Boy Scouts not to even roast hot dogs, but it's not. It was misleading. Apparently, when the Europeans, I've heard several different stories behind this, but I've drank a lot of tea. It's never made me throw up, and other people are saying the same thing. Some say that the Native Americans they saw drinking the tea and throwing up had to throw up to participate in a battle, and it was a purging thing. Others say when this was brought back to Europe, the tea markets from India were so worried that this would take over that they made a scientific name, vomitoria, to discourage. So there are different stories about it. But I drink a lot, and there'll be some this afternoon where we dried, and they're selling it now pretty much across. Some say during the Civil War that in the South this was the only caffeine source of. But for some reason, from Alabama and parts of Mississippi and Alabama, they seem to drink it during the Civil War, but you never see reports of it in Louisiana and East Texas. They just didn't seem to, but they did before. The Native Americans had been drinking it. So I don't know. And the other one other little thing about it, the DNA thing, they found this plant doesn't grow too far north, but they found evidence in teapots and so forth in Illinois of this, so they realized there was an exchange between the southern Native Americans, and so they could get caffeine, and there was Starbucks demand even back prior to it.
So, commodity.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's enough. We can let you take a break and then let y'all photograph some with the numbers and so forth on the table over there. So, any questions?
This is a comment. It's underneath the trees.
If you don't have this, you haven't been out in your yard.
Right,
That's what I would tell you.
I always thought it was poisonous.
Well, that's been a misnomer that the fruits, in fact, some people say the fruits are poisonous, but you can eat them, but they taste bad.
That's the one that's in the pot.
Yeah, but anyway, but they're not. Yeah. So anyway, that's.
So is that the same or different than a holly tree?
It's a holly. But,
It is a holly.
Now, this afternoon we're going to drink tea from American holly. And in the hollies make good tea, not just this one, but they don't have caffeine that I know of. I can't find another one with caffeine at all. But we have American holly. One of the pots over there is American holly. So it's some people's favorite. We have
The
about
red
seven.
berries.
The red berries, yeah.
And that's a tea, you said?
Yeah, you can make a tea out of that one. Yeah, we'll talk about this afternoon.
With the berries, not the leaves?
You could, the leaves are what you would make the tea out of.
Okay,
Yeah,
the leaves.
yeah. The berries are edible and they taste bad, but if somebody were real hungry, they could survive on the berries of holly. I can remember my teacher of botany would pretend to be chewing these, and then we would bite them. He wouldn't bite down on them, and then we'd bite. But anyway, they're not poisonous, even though a lot of websites and a lot of people promote that they're poisonous, but they taste bad.
Yeah.
But we'll have a tea made out of the leaves this afternoon. So, that's poke. That's the poke.
That's the poke, yep.
No, that's edible in the spring. Unfortunately, you won't get to try that, but in the spring we have the young leaves. We boil the water 3 times and then eat the poke. So that was one of the big things of the March, April, May classes. Early May, we ate poke here. But
I thought it was poison.
It is poisonous. It's poisonous now especially, but earlier, when it's young and tender, you boil it, and then I don't know how our ancestors discovered that and why it took 3 times, some say 2. But I had one old lady from New Orleans that said she did not throw the water away, and I have other reports, but I always throw the water away, and I don't eat it this time of the year, but there's plenty of it around here.
So when you say young
So
and
I
tender,
hope
you
you
mean the
know.
leaves?
Yeah, the tips and the leaves and so
Did
forth.
y'all eat them?
No, I just let it grow because I didn't know what it was.
Poke salad?
Guys, if I go
salad.
missing, you know what
I
happened.
let it weed it.
She
Well,
gave me
I
the
haven't
wrong.
let Abby weed anything in
But
about
if you
a year.
watch where it's
it
growing
once it grows
next
up
year, and I'll
start
show you
to
some
flower,
pictures, you'll
and
see
then
it
I go
young
out there
tender
with my
shoots growing up
books
something
and
like big
and
pawpaw
then,
leaves,
like I said,
big
the
tender.
dogs
You
next
cut
to
those
me
off,
eat
boil
them.
it. It's a whole Florida
Is it
parish thing.
poisonous?
Greensburg, that whole area, people used to eat a lot of poke.
Poisonous
And for some
mom
reason,
touches
it's one of
a
those
cold.
weird things. Cajuns didn't seem to eat poke, but the people from Central and North Louisiana and all into Oklahoma and Arkansas. In fact, at one time they actually canned it in eastern Oklahoma, sold poke in cans. But then they I guess there wasn't. I think the reason they stopped was it wasn't demand, but they said they couldn't get people to pick it anymore, so they quit canning poke from eastern Oklahoma. But that's one you have to watch for, and it's totally different in the spring. when it starts to sprout. But in March, you'll start to see this, where this is growing, you'll see those tender shoots coming up. She may talk about it, I don't know if she has it, or she being Corrine. It is medicinal too, those the tubers, the things underground. So I don't know if she's going to talk about it next week, and whether it's in her book, I don't remember which plants. When you're choosing only 50, you've got a lot more medicinal plants than 50. So